All right.
Hey, y'all. It's time for another Google Hangout Midday Online. Yay. Super Don's dancing over there. This is Robert Scott Bell, host of the Robert Scott Bell Show. We just got back from Autism One, dynamic conference with many medical professionals, holistic healthcare professionals, and, of course, a lot of moms and dads concerned about their kids dealing with environmental or vaccine damage and wanting to recover them, as we all do. And one of our favorite docs out there was with us, Dr. John Hicks, and he's here to join us today with a little bit of an update from what we all experienced there at Autism One. We've got Denise with us as well, my producer, Super Don. Anybody else I leave off the list there, Denise?
Nope. This is the game for today, for today's
We're
hangout.
comprehensive. And Dr. Hicks, I have to say, your wife Betsy was a very popular gal there. She was cooking up some good food for everybody. Didn't realize how extraordinary she is.
Yeah, she really likes that. She thinks that's a lot of fun, and that the whole education piece and being able to help is really a big piece. So that's really a good thing.
Excellent. Now, Dr. Hicks, was this the first Autism One conference you had come to this year in Chicago?
No, I've been at every Autism One conference since it started. Covered a variety of topics, but I must say I think this was my favorite one so far.
Yeah, this was my third year going, Dr. Hicks, and I tell you, this definitely was the tops. The energy was great. The information that was flowing was wonderful. This was the first time we were also able to introduce folks to the concept of cannabidiol, the CBD from the industrial hemp, and really from last year to this year, it was like night and day in terms of, there was some preliminary discussion, some whispers a year ago, but really nothing like the science that was presented. I know you presented some. Dr. Bradstreet also opened up the world to some of the things, the scientific breakthroughs that have been made, and I think maybe now would be the time on this Google Hangout to kind of reveal some of the things we learned or were presented at this year's Autism One.
Well, I think one of the biggest pieces that a lot of the parents were really interested in was the whole piece with seizures. And how does cannabidiol, the CBD, help control seizures? And so probably the largest part of my talk this year was focused on the different mechanisms by which CBD does what it does. So there are literally 11 processes and different reactions that CBD can have in helping to control seizures. And probably one of the most powerful is regulating the amount of free calcium in the cells so that it makes them more relaxed and not so hyper-excitable. And that is a huge difference, because that, for neurons, that really controls how excitable they are and how they're going to react when they get exposed to an impulse. So the CBD, I think, from that perspective, really has some big advantages that other things don't have. Plus, it doesn't have the side effects that this is a supplement, and it's fairly specific. And it doesn't have the side effects that a lot of the medications have. It doesn't wipe you out. You don't get any psychotropic effects. You're not just wiped out. So, I mean, it presents a really unique opportunity and diversifies what we can do. And I think from that perspective, we're really looking at something that's very advantageous.
Yeah, one of the things I've addressed for many years with these kids, in whether it be in the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder scenario or otherwise, these some so-called excitotoxins, the things that do work on the nerves, the nerve endings, whether they be in the peripheral nervous system or in the brain, and anything that can calm that down without simultaneously damaging the nerves or shutting down the communication is an extraordinary leap forward from what typically has been available in modern medical drug type circles. So this, to me, is a major advancement in understanding the ability to reduce or neutralize a lot of the excitotoxins. Now, this doesn't mean that suddenly we want people to indulge and dive into vats of monosodium glutamate, does it?
No, no, you still have to use some reason and common sense. And I think, the other really big point is this is a new tool, and it's going to benefit a lot of people. Other people it may not be as good for. It's really going to depend on the individual, and I think that's, as we look at the endocannabinoid system and start to understand it more, and that's really a big piece that has been left out of medical understanding in the U.S. for sure, of how does this system work. And I think it's really an interesting piece to understand that this system helps regulate every other system. So this is communication between every part of your body is going through this endocannabinoid system. So you think about, okay, we're talking about the CBD for seizures, but it helps reduce anxiety, it helps reduce impulsivity, it helps focus and concentration, it helps memory. I mean, you start going down the list with the research that's been done, which is very extensive. So I think from that perspective, it really can add a lot to what our choices are. And now it's just trying to figure this out and understand.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and you get this as well, and I think a lot of the practitioners who I talk to at Autism One realize we're fitting this botanical into that larger picture of many things that have gone awry or wrong in these children, and now even young adults that have been hammered environmentally or through the chemicals and metals, et cetera, that are in vaccines. And there's a lot of healing that has to take place in a lot of systems. And as we learn about the CBD from the industrial hemp, and thankfully available right now in all 50 states, so we don't have to wait for legislation to pass in a lot of the states that haven't addressed this issue yet, we have another tool that is safe and non-toxic for these kids in particular to address one part of it. But we're not promoting irresponsible use of a botanical, not that that's easy to do anyway, because it's something that the body can by and large utilize, process, and excrete readily. And of course we know that endocannabinoid system has not been really studied well in the medical circles here in the United States, and it's just now making a resurgence, if you will. So we know how to fit it better into an entire protocol, because for years, as you said, being at Autism One, exploring the many things that have been presented, a lot of legitimate therapies as well, this was a missing aspect, in my opinion, and I think you would share that, a major league missing aspect in the recovery of these kids.
Right. And I think we don't even realize the gravity of this endocannabinoid system. And you start to look, there's a book called The Endocannabinoid System that was written in 2005. So this stuff goes back years. But it's just that we haven't explored it, we haven't understood it, so we've sort of been in the dark. So I think as we look at this and start to look at the research that's been done on cannabidiol, what are the potentials that it can do, and it's really sort of staggering when you start to look at it. I've got over 5,000 articles on cannabidiol and talking about different mechanisms and what it can do for different conditions. So, I mean, it's very powerful, and I think the neatest thing is it's natural. And so our bodies know how to handle that. And when you look at some of the research on inflammation, your body, as it starts to get inflamed, creates more CB2 receptors. And cannabidiol is a weak agonist, so your body is calling for that to help reduce the inflammation.
Yes. My focus for many years, because of my own health challenges as a young man or child, even all the way through my young adult years, was gastrointestinal. And the healing protocols that I've worked with physicians on have been a great acceleration, even over my experience, which took me a couple of years when I embraced homeopathy and other natural mechanisms. I'm looking and studying, as well as you are, on the CBD component, the endocannabinoid system, the fact that the receptors are just so rich there in the GI tract itself, as well as, of course, the brain and the rest of the nervous system, that I really perceive that as much as I've accelerated the healing for folks, I think this is going to, again, half the time it takes to recover. Now, granted, each case is individual, so we don't say everybody is going to respond the same way at the same pace, because the nature of medicine, as it should be, is taking each case individually. But if in all of the cases, we have ignored a system that we either didn't know about or weren't versed in enough to know how to interact with it, we begin to see a potential for recovery of children that have been recovered in a great deal of difficulty. But as I said, streamlining and accelerating those recoveries, because now we have a system and we have a way to access it safely, and that's remarkable. Again, that's why I say what happened at Autism One is a major breakthrough, in my opinion. Not to denigrate anything else that occurred, this was probably this year on the lips of everybody there. What are we learning about this system? Now, this past Monday, we interviewed Dr. Jeff Bradstreet on the Robert Scott Bell Show on Advanced Medicine Monday. I don't know if you were able to attend his presentation. Maybe you can parse some of what he presented, maybe help a lay audience understand the significance of some of what he presented in his paper and his lecture.
Well, what I think the big take-home message from that was that our gut flora interact with the endocannabinoid system. And if we have bad dysbiosis, in other words, bacteria that don't belong there, they can be sending bad signals, which can then cause issues within the endocannabinoid system and start affecting other systems. So this is, I think, when you start talking about holistic and seeing this is really a holistic piece of what's going on, because this system interacts all cell types, every organ, every system, and it's trying to adjust to the changes that are going on in the environment. And I think when we stop and think about this, what is going on in the gut, we keep coming back to that gut piece. And I think that gut-brain connection is important. Inflammation in the gut, you have inflammation in the brain. So part of what he was really presenting there is that this system is regulating a lot more than we've ever thought about. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's really the biggest piece of what he was presenting.
Yeah, and it fits into what we already knew when we talk about the focus on healing, being the gut, the nervous system. Of course, we also talk about detoxification being critical, but all of these things are related. When I talk detox, it's not just the liver, although the liver is critically important, and of course we find that there's a tremendous amount of receptors within the endocannabinoid system within the liver, which is exciting to me, because it means that enhancing or working with that system is going to also improve perhaps the function of the liver that has been so challenged by so many environmental assaults. Again, from naturally or semi-naturally occurring environmental assaults that you breathe in, or the ones that are artificially introduced via injection, all compounding not only the impact on the digestive system, because remember, let's see what Andy Wakefield, what was the controversy about Dr. Wakefield's findings initially, when he didn't conclude that vaccines caused autism, but he observed that in the children who were vaccinated with MMR had what he called iatrogenic enterocolitis, idiopathic perhaps, and where the doc said, we don't know why this is happening, but he observed that it happened. And from that moment forward, he was attacked viciously, because there was an indirect link between what was happening after vaccination, the damage to the gut, which was even more primary perhaps than the damage to the brain and the nervous system, because of the connection between the two. Now, this is of great controversy, but as we say, we look to heal those systems, all of them simultaneously if possible. But if we can see the benefit of the CBD on all of those systems, then we know that we are on a track of accelerated recovery. And that seems to be a theme for me, as you can hear me say it. Each time I'm digesting it and getting it, embracing it even more.
Right. Well, and then you think, okay, so CBD really does help with gut inflammation piece. But it helps that directly by decreasing the inflammation there. It also works through the gastroenteric nervous system to help decrease inflammation too. So it's not just doing that. And then it's immune modulating. So it's like coming at that with multiple choices of how it can affect that and help correct that. So to me, you're looking at something that has tremendous potential, and it's a supplement. I mean, you can't do better than that.
Imagine that, a supplement, not a drug. Of course, we recognize the economic imperative of certain industries to maintain stranglehold monopolies, but the medical community that has not been enlightened, has not opened up to these concepts, is very much in fear of botanical medicine in a general way. We've seen the schism over a century or more.
Right.
Just the dawn of homeopathy, followed by the development of, or the dawning of what was known as the American Medical Association. Interestingly enough, if people don't know, the AMA was founded as a trade organization with partly the intent to denigrate or discredit homeopathic medicine, which, by the way, utilized cannabis indica, cannabis sativa, as well as one of its normal botanical medicines within that pharmacopoeia. And then here we are struggling, 200 plus years later still, with embracing again plants as medicine, plants as food. Of course, we recognize them as food, but as medicine, Hippocrates had talked about it, but we kind of lost our way in modern 20th century America in particular. Here in the 21st, the struggle, the death throes, I think, of this limitation of the thought form on botanicals as medicine, we have abandoned it. It's now becoming something that more and more physicians I see are finally acknowledging and embracing and going beyond the limited training that they had when the botanical blinders, I shall say, were put on them in medical school.
Right. Well, you're just not taught that. You're taught drugs, and that's limiting. It's really putting a pair of handcuffs on you and going, okay, there's a lot of things out here, but you can't use those. You can only use these medications.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from that perspective, it's very restrictive.
Right.
And I think, medicine has to sort of wake up and go, okay, there's some other things going on that may be natural, and maybe we need to think about understanding this whole piece. And are there ways we can help patients get better? And
right. Dr. Hicks, at Autism One this year, interacting, because we've been interviewing a lot of moms and dads about their experience in using the CBD with their children, particularly in seizure disorders, some of the most profound discussions we've had, and really heartwarming to see the recoveries. Many of them have been on, or maybe currently on, medications, anti-seizure medications. They've been disappointed with the results of them. They found that they had many side effects that were, as bad or worse than the seizures even. And when they got on the CBD for these kids, they've seen great reductions in them, from extremes of hundreds and beyond to zero. Some have maintained still utilizing the drug, so we see that there's not a contraindication at this point that I've heard of. But then some are able to abandon the drugs altogether. This is an interesting development. Did you interview any? I know you've had some interaction with some of these folks, but I didn't know if there were any families that came to you. Did you talk to moms and dads about this at all at the Autism One conference?
Yeah, that was a fairly common question that we talked about a lot, that I talked about with parents. And it's really, this whole point that we were making a little earlier. It's an individual thing, and each person's body is different, and the triggers are different, mechanisms can be different. So it's figuring out what works for you. And for a lot of parents, as the seizures decreased, then some of them decided, well, let's decrease the medications, let's see if we can hold it without even doing that. And for a lot of the patients, it worked. So I think it's really going to be an individual piece of what is working for you versus what works for somebody else. And you really, it's that whole comparison thing. And I think that's where medicine, we try to make these cure-all things that's just across the board, so it has become cookie cutter. You do it this way, you do it this way, you do it this way. And these are the steps. But I think the reality is you have to look at the individual, what's going on with their body, and then make a decision based on what you can do for them with their situation, not just the general thing that this is what we do for everybody.
Yeah, this is how do we say it? It's a challenging discussion that I have on the air almost all the time about a collectivist mindset or collectivist mentality in medicine. Even the so-called attempts at through science, through what they call science of experimentation and revealing things, it's all with the thought form that we'll take whatever molecules we can synthesize in patent and apply them equally across the board to everybody, which is just kind of nonsense to begin, dangerous nonsense in my opinion, because you've addressed it without saying it, biochemical individuality. We may, let's say, correctly assume that now, safely, scientifically validated, that we all have an endocannabinoid system. It just exists in all of us. What level of interaction we'll need with those so-called botanical chemicals that provide things like CBD or other cannabinoids, it's going to be different for everybody. That's that biochemical individuality. And that's one of the biggest questions we get. All right, when we discover the CBD, how much do I take? And even if you were to do an analysis, a major league analysis of how these chemicals interact with the body, you are going to have to find out with each individual how much is right for them. To standardize and milligram it for the same for every child, it's just not real medicine in my opinion. I don't know if I'm making any sense there, but that's the kind of habit that modern medicine has fallen into as well.
Right. Well, and that's that whole thing of it's a cookie cutter. So you're going to do 25 milligrams of this no matter what. And the reality is everybody's endocannabinoid system is different, responds differently. So you want to start small and then increase until you're getting the effects you want. So I think that's really sort of a common sense approach. Mm-hmm. And that is really, I think, what needs to be in medicine. We need to be more common sense about what we're doing and what we're choosing and make it individual. I mean,
right.
There are ways to look at systems and figure out what's going on with the individual, and then you start to react and go, okay, this and this and this are going on, so I'm going to do this.
Right. Now, part of the fitting it into the big picture, again, another theme that's been probably one of the more prominent themes over the years, my good friend Dr. Rashid Bittar was there as well, talking about the need to detoxify the body from environmental toxins, persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals, mercury, etc. And again, this to me is the responsible way to describe how to use it within the big picture, that it isn't just a panacea, that you can ignore other environmental factors or nutrient deficiencies, but healing the gut is all important, healing and soothing the nervous system is all important, but if we do not remove the trigger for the fire or the fuel for that fire,
right,
we're doing, allopathic CBD infusions, if you will. It's kind of a crossover. Right. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And I'm encouraged because I know where you are and you recognize all of these things. But again, I think it's important to communicate that bigger picture, that we aren't removing now the need to address these environmental triggers as well as supporting the endocannabinoid system.
Right. And that's just another piece of how do we help support that. So as we look and we start to say, okay, these systems aren't quite working right, what is it we need to do? And you really have to take an approach that allows you to start looking at each system, what's wrong, how can I support that system, and how can I make it better? So when you start looking at that, it's like, okay, this is really what we need to do. We need to work on focusing on looking at why things happen, and I think that's really, your point is well taken. If you don't address why it happened and what's going on, you're really going to create more issues. So you've got to sort of go at it from the ground up and then go through those systems.
Beautiful. Now, we have my producer, Super Don Naylor, as we call him, Super Don, and we have Denise here with us, and we don't want to discard them from the communication here. That's not our intent, but I love
you
talking.
guys are on a roll, man. You guys, I just like getting back. I was going to get hurt if I jumped in the middle of that.
Oh, I love Dr. Hicks, and I love chatting with you, and it's like we can kind of lose the sight of the larger audience, and we don't want to do that. So, Don, Denise, welcome into the discussion. My apologies for monopolizing it with Dr. Hicks.
Quite all right. Hey, so what I've taken away, and it was a privilege for me to be able to attend Autism One as well, and join in on your presentations and learn quite a lot. So what I learned was that environmental is a very big factor in what's happening with these children, and the heavy metals within the environment that are coming into their body are really an important factor. So how would you talk about possible solutions of eliminating those heavy metals from our bodies?
Well, if I can just address one thing about that, there are multiple ways to go at that, and sort of the way I like to approach that is, what is happening with your detoxification system that you are retaining heavy metals? Your system really should be able to dump what you're exposed to. Now, granted, over the years, the exposure has become greater and greater. So to me, what I like to do is look at what is going on in that system. You can look at the DNA for that detox system and figure out if the pieces that are supposed to be dumping heavy metals aren't working right. You can start to support that, and it will literally start to work and dump those metals. You know, that another approach is, well, we can chelate you and give you compounds that will pull those metals out. So, you know, there's different approaches, and depending on what's going on with the individual. But I think with the younger you can get them, and the quicker you can understand what's going on with the detoxification system, the quicker you can make a significant difference without, you know, really radical interventions. And so, you know, you can use homeopathics. There's a bunch of things that you can use that will help you get to the place that you're allowing this person to detoxify. So, I mean, that's really at the basis to me is why, or, you know, if they're retaining heavy metals, why? That's sort of how I approach it. So then you go, okay, is this system working or not?
Sure.
And then you decide, okay, how am I going to approach this that supports that and allow them to dump what it is they need to dump?
Yeah. Now, Denise has my book. It's called Unlock the Power to Heal. We do talk about detox pathways, certain key minerals. You can hold, I don't know how to switch the camera so you can see what she's holding up there.
Denise, say something.
Say something.
Yay! Oh, no, I said something. Wait a minute, say something again.
This is Robert's book. It's wonderful. I recommend it.
Thank you. It's an overview, but we also go into some of the recent revelations about CBD. But you know, to Dr. Hicks' point, there are 1,000, if not 100,000, ways to go to help the detox pathways of the body. And I think we need to encounter doctors and holistic doctors as well that are understanding and working with it, like Dr. Batar and other medical and DO physicians that have the ability to do more aggressive intravenous and transdermal chelations to grab the deep-seated intense mercury exposure, for instance. That's warranted. For more botanical approaches, there are many things that we discuss. For me, the mineral of all minerals that helps to bind the metals ultimately is selenium, although I don't talk about it in a vacuum, but I do recognize that much of the food that we consume is seleno deficient, and the soils are as well, and that is impacting our ability to produce adequate quantities of glutathione and metallothioneins. It gets pretty technical, but there are homeopathic detoxifying remedies that can stimulate the metabolism to address and bind and excrete. So we can't do this in a vacuum. We've got to recognize a little of everything, perhaps a lot of some things along the way. One of the things that Dr. Batar brings up is the difficulty in sometimes determining whether a child is mercury toxic because the mercury will not be relinquished. It's been stuck deep in the tissues, and the body has not had the ability to release it, doesn't want to, because there's an intelligence there. If it can't be fully removed, it can be very dangerous, and the body is adapted for survival. You know, learn about Hans Selye and the adaptation syndrome, you realize that if we don't deal with these toxins efficiently, the body will try to survive through other mechanisms, and it may hold on to them, trying to minimize damage, but maybe not be as successful with these children, especially with their brain and neurological system so impacted by these metals more so than others. There are those that can excrete easier. So these are strategies, some of which I list in the book, and Dr. Hicks knows as well as a physician, and that we encourage you to open up to the many possibilities. And if one doesn't work, there are probably 10, if not 100 or 1,000 others that might, so don't give up. Do your homework, do your research, and see how this fits in. Now, definitely see visually and in communicating with these families that the CBD is a component that we did not know of, did not have before until recently. And so I'm very encouraged to integrate it as we've done. But I'm also grateful, Denise, that you asked that question, and Don as well, that we broaden the scope so people understand that we're not talking about a panacea. Again, we don't want to be irresponsible about this and say it's the cure for everything, even if it has an extraordinary impact on so many systems and so many people are seeing extraordinary benefits by it. We're not diminishing it, but at the same time, we're trying to provide that larger context.
Right. And I think, that's really an important piece, that there isn't just one thing that's going to fix everything. And it's that whole starting at the ground floor, what's going on, what are the issues, and then working through that, and then how do we deal with these pieces. And it really has to be a combination of things that are put into place that help each individual. And that has to be based on what's going on with that person.
No. The presentations also. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Oh no, I was just curious. One of the things that we've touched on here is the relationship between the gut and, in particular, autism. But we find all the time that if you follow the news and the studies that are coming out, that doctors now are just scratching their heads, going, "I had no idea. The gut has a lot to do with everything. I never knew this," because they're finding the gut is related to diabetes. The gut is related to depression. The gut is related to all of these other things where before they just never connected the dots. And so what we're finding is that if the gut isn't right, then you're going to have just a plethora of possible problems that are going to result from that. So some people may be wondering, okay, so if the gut is kind of the second brain of the body there, and you've got to keep that healthy, what can people do in order to heal the gut, to repair the gut, in order to get things balanced as to where they should be so they aren't dealing with those kinds of problems?
Well, a great place to start when you start looking at the gut and what can you do, I think probiotics are by far the biggest piece, and not just oral probiotics, but lacto-fermented foods, because they really start to help implant good flora that should be there. And those are the guys that really contribute. You look at there's been new studies done on probiotics, and they've shown that probiotics can actually reduce anxiety. The probiotics affect your focus and concentration. Probiotics help to modulate your reaction to stress. They help to modulate how your hypothalamus and pituitary work, so your whole endocrine system. So the more we're learning about these gut flora, the more we see, it is that thing. You scratch your head and you go, gee, I never even imagined that this could be that powerful. I mean, you think about like gut flora, that microbiome, we have more of that than we have cells of ourselves. So most of the DNA in our body isn't even us. It belongs to the probiotics and the flora. So if you've got bad flora growing, it's going to make you crave things. It's going to make you act in ways that you wouldn't if you didn't have the bad flora. So I think we're learning it's a bigger and bigger deal.
Every time a man gets a little arrogant, I just point out that without the critters in their gut, they're nothing. You talk about being squashed like a bug. Try to kill all your flora and survive, right?
Sure.
And much of what we do in medicine, modern medicine, I should say, has been to damage and destroy because it looks at bacteria as an enemy. We go back to the concepts brought out or stolen and brought out in an inappropriate fashion, the Louis Pasteur concept of the germ theory as a basis for attacking and killing things. And not many physicians in America learn of his contemporaries who were actually, I think, the smart ones, Antoine Béchamp and Claude Bernard. And these are the guys that actually understood the concepts and applied them appropriately, but instead the dominant model that won because of the economics behind it, this idea that we must kill things before they kill us. And the irony of that is that we are destroying ourselves in that process. So recovery of that understanding, which is what we are in the midst of here in the West, like Dr. Hicks, you said, the probiotics, the cultured fermented foods, things that have been around for thousands of years. Even more recently, within the last 5 or 6 years, I covered a story, and it keeps popping up in the news cycle, how Duke University finally figured out that God did not goof when he gave us an appendix. They said, oh my gosh, you mean there's a reason for this?
Extra parts, extra parts. I don't know how that happened.
And they do that. They say, well, you don't really need that. I mean, that's how medical doctors, and again, we're not indicting them all, but just the dumb ones, the ones that can't think clearly, they look at body parts as removable pieces, you know?
Right.
And to think that the appendix was just an accident, and then they find out it may have been, in fact, designed as the seeds or storehouse for microflora should you be at the time when we didn't have all the technology and probiotics in the health food stores and things, where you had a food poisoning and your gut was just evacuated. Where were you going to get it before the time that you could go to get a probiotic? Well, evidently that was a seed storehouse to replenish and restart it again. Now, we have advancements that can allow us to do that from an external way or with food choices, but I think that the development of this level of understanding is going to transform the future of medicine. You know, we're going to be talking about not drugs, we're going to be talking about microflora, balancing the microflora being essential to everything, including detoxification, but as well emotions, healthy interactions, immune function, endocrine function, all of these things that are now validated as associated directly and indirectly with that healthy balance in the body.
Yeah. And to me, it's all about balance. You know, you don't need to kill anything. You just need to have things in balance. And that's when you look back to the contemporaries of Pasteur, that's really what they were saying, it's the terrain. And when you control the terrain then modulates everything else. And I think some of the big studies now are showing that if you have enough probiotics, bugs like Salmonella and Shigella can't even attach to make you sick. So it's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is how some people survive the bubonic plague. They had
Right.
a flora that could fight off the bacteria, and they didn't get sick. You know,
Yes.
everybody would have died. So,
Right.
you know, some live. So how did that happen? So you have to look at, okay, you know, we didn't have refrigerators then, so a lot of things were salted and fermented. That's how you preserve them. So
Yeah.
they were getting probiotics. They didn't know that, but they did.
So we now know that Superman was Superman because he had good gut flora, good gut ecology,
Right.
and that kryptonite was really antibiotics. And what Lex Luthor was doing was just surreptitiously destroying these probiotic cultures in Superman. That's why he got weak. Now, I know it sounds like a joke,
Wow.
but I'm giving you
I
the
like
perspective that they couldn't come out with, or else DC Comics would have been put out of business too early for giving you that insight.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Hicks. The CBD-rich hemp oil that's available in all 50 states, we covered this on prior hangouts. How does CBD affect the individual cells?
Well, what CBD is doing is supporting your body's ability to respond. So it's supporting your immune system. It's supporting your gut to reduce inflammation. And it actually has antibacterial action for bad bacteria in the gut. It's been shown that it can kill MRSA. So it does have that potential power. So, I mean, you start thinking, gee, this is a supplement, it's going to help reduce inflammation, it's going to get rid of bad gut bugs. I mean, it's going to help in a myriad of ways, and that's why I think really looking at it as a supplement that is there to support your long-term health is a good way to look at it, because I think it can really provide support that your body really needs to keep you at your maximum capacity.
Well, thank you for answering that. So, you could possibly say, and I know that we live in a quote-unquote ribbonized society in the community outreach realm, the icon for autism are puzzle pieces. because we're putting together this piece of puzzle to come up with a solution to help individuals. And it's very individual as far as the solution, as we talked about. But would you, in both of your medical opinions, say that rich hemp oil is a very big puzzle piece of the solution?
Well, I think it may be a piece of the glue that holds the puzzle pieces together.
Wow. Yeah, come hang out.
You know, I think really as you look at the pieces, so what are those pieces we think about the puzzle pieces? So it's immune system, it's detox, it's gut, it's all these things. And you look at CBD and what does it do? It supports all of those systems. So to me, when you look at it, this may be the glue that's helping to hold and put things together. So that's sort of how I see it.
And so our endocannabinoid system, as you said, Robert, God didn't goof, no matter what religion you come from. It's a part of us, and therefore, as this nutritional supplement comes back into the picture, and it's the glue that holds everything together. I mean, this is a very big component for every person on this planet. Do you agree?
Well,
yes. Yes. The neglect of any system, of course, results in ailments, deficiencies, proficiencies of certain things you don't like toxins, and that we've neglected a system so vital to every area of functioning. It's extraordinary that we survive. That's a testament to the power and majesty of creation itself, in my opinion. But we look at the degradation diseases that have basically taken over the Western world, and we can point to a lot of things that we already know, but the one thing that we evidently didn't know as much was the abandonment, if you will, if not the outright neglect, or both in this case, of that system. And then what has to happen or take place is that other systems have to kind of take over and hyper respond or hyper act to balance or shift the balance in there, and that by reintegrating, by supporting and nourishing a system that had long been neglected, we now have the ability to be more efficient in recovery. That's why I say when I've been working with folks to heal their gut and accelerating that, I've always been about efficiency. This is another layer of that efficiency perhaps that supersedes all of the others. As Dr. Hicks puts, could be the glue that holds it all together, but it really is, to me, another aspect of the acceleration of recovery for so many good folks, good doctors out there that have been working diligently to figure this thing out, to get these kids well, to get adults well. And we didn't have the tools necessarily accessible because of what happened in our history. Again, another thing that we have talked about before and will continue to discuss. And we may be able to reveal more of that at the Chicago Cannabis Conference June 7th and 8th at the Navy Pier coming up as well.
I'm very excited about that conference. For those folks that are interested and in learning more from a wide variety of speakers, including Robert Scott Bell and Dr. Hicks, there's Doc Rob. From a sports medicine perspective, there is Brandon Vera, who's a fighter. There are just so many more. Sorry, they escape me right now. But there's just going to be so much knowledge shared about this particular topic. It's in the Midwest. The website is ChicagoCannabisConference.com. And we would like to thank our friends at mycompassion.org for hosting this. Having just come back from Autism One, which was in Chicago, I can tell you that there are 10 electronic billboards lit up around Chicago metro area promoting this event. And apparently it's quite popular, and there are people that are purchasing tickets as far west as Arizona and as far north as Canada. So if this is something that you want hands-on experience with and hands-on knowledge from, ChicagoCannabisConference.com.
Well, look forward to seeing you all there. Dr. Hicks, it was always a great time to connect. I was so glad to meet your wife, Betsy, and all the great work she's doing in providing good, nourishing food and teaching others to do that as well. And, of course, while we heal the gut, we're better able to utilize the good food that we hope we're all making better choices to put into our body to support the recovery of all those who are ready to get well. And that includes this great nutritional, let's say, advancement of our understanding that CBD has a place, a vital place and role in our daily diet, daily consumption, not just to reverse things that we want to reverse, but literally to prevent them from happening in the first place. So our kids now can benefit, and their kids can benefit with the knowledge that we are now once again bringing out. very exciting times.
I feel very excited about what we're learning. And I just feel that it's going to be of such great benefit to all people. It's, you know, not limited to one group or another. It could be for everybody.
And just for the viewers that are out there, if you know anybody that this could possibly affect, which would be everybody that you know, if you have questions about it, please go to herbdayonline.com. That's HRBdayonline.com. Go ahead and ask your questions through the opt-in, and we will be sure in our future hangouts that we get your questions answered. So again, and the replay of this will be available through herbdayonline.com. Later this week, we've got some really big topics, and we'll be continuing this conversation about natural products, but in particular about CBD and CBD hemp oil and its availability, you know, all around the country. Anyhow, we will have some really exciting topics, so stay tuned and send your questions.
And Don, before we break, I got to ask you, do we have a video or audio available of Dr. Bradstreet when we interviewed him at Autism One? We just recently aired that on the Robert Scott Bell Show.
That's coming up. If you go to the YouTube channel, the RS Bell Media YouTube channel, we are getting those up every day. So we've got some that are already up, and so you probably look for sometime later on this afternoon. We'll have the Dr. Bradstreet interview up.
Beautiful. Another resource, and we continue to cover this 6 days a week on our show as well. And Dr. Hicks is always an open door policy with him on the show whenever he's got a moment. But I'm glad we were able to get together again here at Herb Day Online for another great healing Google Hangout. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right.